reality of coming to the point where you realise something was completely out of your control, and it was a micro-incremental progression in terms of disintegration. Progression, usually you think of growth, but progression can also come in deterioration as well, into immaturity. People can go from mature to immature as well. And that's really the essence of what narcissism is. When we look at this by way of covert emotional incest, and I've run into this 3 times now, very seriously, and it was aggressive and active to destroy any involvement I was going to have in that dimension, in that family dimension. It's so chameleonized, the way in which it works. It's so brilliantly evil. And what happens is the family members that have usually lost relationships, they've brought, for instance, the parents have brought children into the world, and these children have watched the parents disintegrate and narcissize each other to separation, one or the other or both. Then it's very easy and convenient and instinctive for the parent to now draw that child, let's say in my case the mother and the son, into a post-maternal dimension, post-parental dimension, in which the parent brings the child past the boundaries of parent to child to parent, into parent to partner at the emotional level and semi-physical level. And the reason why it's called covert emotional incest is it starts off like anything else, elementary. But as the boundaries get pushed and the flirting gets stronger and the absence of the other parent and the dysfunction that comes with that goes on, it gets braver in its closeness, in its intimacy. So the mother will get a little bit more support from the son, tell the son personal things that she ought not. For instance, I've heard firsthand from women that I've been with that their sons would help them look for people on the internet for the mother. The mother would allow the son to help them decide who the potential intimate supply would be, because the son can't give physical intimate supply, but the mother would allow the son to be one of the hunters of that. Now just think about that for a minute, how evil that is. That's absolutely none of the son's business. But these women, because they become so violated, personally violated by their sinful nature and their desires and lusts, and if you contribute to that the way in which they're probably assisted in the relationship degenerating to separation, and now the convenience of a young son who they can form into their little husband with all their manipulations and conveniences that they can offer the son. A little bit of cleavage. Whoops, I shouldn't have walked into the bathroom while you were there. Mum, are you in there? The door etches open. Yes, how can I help you? The head comes through the door. Mum's in the shower. little violations and intrusions that now become acceptable. Mum, who's that man you're looking at on the internet? Oh, come and let's... And they laugh together and joke and whatnot. The mother interferes in the son's relationships. Oh, she done this, but the mother doesn't give counsel that's going to help the thing to grow. She gives counsel that undermines the girlfriend and enables the son's infantile mentality rather than checking him and helping him to grow. And so together they become infantile without boundaries and no check on each other. There's nobody to check them, so they can run rebel as far as they like. The next thing, they're sitting at the table eating dinner, and then they're sitting on the lounge together, with him leaning up against the mother or the mother up against him, and hand on lap, head on chest. And it just becomes a bond that's called covert emotional incest. Now, that covert emotional incest can press the boundaries of physical incest up so far as intercourse. Okay? But there will be fondling, not just mentally and verbally, but physically as well. Head on mum's chest, on mum's breasts, watching telly. I had an instance, you can believe it or not, but I was there, where I'd met this woman. The relationship was about a month in. The son lived with the mother. The father was sabotaged. And I don't think the son was in agreement with the separation, but he went with his mother because he was mum's little husband. So to some degree I'd say he had his contribution to the breakup. I didn't think the father was all that bad, who I grew to know. He probably didn't function as physically as well as he should have, but at that point I think that was all irrelevant. And so I started staying at the house of this potential girlfriend, and one night at about 1 o'clock in the morning the door cracked open, and I thought, oh, he must be going to ask his mother something. Nope. Pitter patter. This, what was he then, 18-year-old, 6'4" son hops into bed next to his mother with me on the other side of the bed. Now, had I have not known what covert emotional incest is, and had I have not grown up in a family where my mother had a partner who wasn't my father, I wouldn't... Look, as far as that was out of order, we do try and find justifications for it, but I could not. The only thing I could conclude was a serious case of covert emotional incest, which was right before me. I've never heard of a son getting into bed, 18-year-old, with their mother while there's a boyfriend in the bed. I've never heard of it, but I've seen it. I've seen it with my own two eyes. I've experienced it twice. And after the first time there was a chastisement, but that didn't stop the second time. So you can see how determined and powerful covert emotional is. It's an unbreakable fusion. To cut a long story short, it was the covert emotional incest that destroyed later, 5 years later, the marriage. But anyway, that just shows you. But what happens is when the relationship starts to flourish and the son gets pushed further to the side and the narcissistic supply, because it's all degenerative, which makes it narcissistic. Narcissism runs on devaluation to discard degeneration. as the narcissistic mother began to narcissize the son, right, because her supply was now being turned towards the new athletic boyfriend who had everything the husband didn't have physically. The son's going to get put on the back burner. I've seen this several times. And the only way the narcissistic son can try and salvage anything, because he hasn't got the masculinity of the new male, is to go into, and you all would have heard this, a narcissistic collapse, or suffer initially a narcissistic injury, which escalates into a complete collapse. I've seen these young males urinate themselves, fainting, threaten to go across the other side of the country with a new job, back the mother up in the corner around the neck and threaten to leave the house, disappear for days without saying where they're going, to try and cause a panic which will manipulate the mother to get the focus back on them. I've seen them feign fits and become so bad in their mentality that their degenerative mindset has brought severe sicknesses onto them, which has forced the mother to abandon the relationship and focus on the sickness of the adult son. And mothers will do this as well. I'm sure many of you listeners, particularly the women, have had partners where the mother's, one way or another, willed herself sick so that everybody would drop everything and gather around the mother and put their focus on the mother. That's how covert emotional incest works, but that you can see the narcissism working within that. Everything around it gets narcissized. It's a complete no-win situation, and I'm sure many of you are now going, hang on a sec, that situation I was in was much bigger than I thought. And even from biblical time, if you know, those family situations, you'll see that the mother was undermining the father through the son. Jacob and Esau, and the mother, all that. And so that's the danger. The danger is that supply is not going to be able to be distributed at the level of which it was before the outsider came along. So the outsider is going to be trying to build. In my case, the mother's going to try and divide the supply up between the adult male child. That's not going to happen. He'll go into a narcissistic injury, onto a complete narcissistic collapse, because if you're A-grade supply, the mother's going to go with her instincts, which are to satisfy her own desires. So she'll hold the child out as long as she can, drip feeding what she can, until the person, as in my case, just doesn't want to put up with it anymore, unfulfilled, watching all this, which tells you that it can't work. A lot of people stay in these things thinking that somebody's going to change, but you're up against instincts and psychologies that won't change. It's not how it works. It's unchangeable. So the sooner you can get out and realise that it was a set of circumstances that had nothing to do with you, and it wouldn't matter. See, a lot of people try and devote themselves further to try and make change, but it can't make change because it's set in stone, and you have to surrender and say, no, that's an unchangeable brokenness that I haven't been appointed to fix, and you've got to surrender, humble yourself and say, okay, that's too big for me, I'm not good enough for that, I'm not going to be valuable enough to change that. You'll be devalued. Instead of idealizing yourself in a way in which you one day will be valued, defeat yourself and say, no, that's not a situation I can win in. Leave those people to themselves. Leave. Go no contact. Never go back, and find your new journey to healing.